Здравствуйте, подписчики и
Hello to all guests and subscribers of the best and most informative channel about life in Turkey, brought to you by Tolerance Homes. My name is Alinias and I will be leading today's episode. Turkish language for beginners. How do you learn Turkish from zero? Is it possible to move to Turkey permanently without speaking Turkish? Where do you even begin? By watching Turkish shows or using textbooks? I will share my personal experience of learning Turkish with you. And we'll begin in a moment. Stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching this video. Today, I would like to continue telling you about my experience and how I adapted to life in Turkey, how I started school here without knowing any Turkish. This question is something many people are worried about when they're considering their move to this country. I should let you know from the start that living in a country without knowing the language is impossible. I will share how I learned personally, what difficulties I encountered, and how I was able to make the process fun and engaging for myself. When it was clear that we were moving to Turkey, I had two options, going to a Russian school or a Turkish school. I knew that I would need to learn Turkish either way because it wasn't like we came here temporarily, we were moving here for good. I have decided against going to a Russian school for two main reasons. Firstly, it was expensive, about $4,000 to $5,000 a year if I remember correctly. Secondly, I just don't need Russian education because I don't plan on going back to Russia and paying this sum would be redundant. So, I had one option left, a Turkish school, and I started learning Turkish. To do that, I used a textbook called Istanbul A1, which is very easy and intuitive to learn from and teach yourself. And after finishing about half the textbook, I decided it was time to start watching some Turkish shows. The idea of learning Turkish from watching TV was my mother's. She always talked about how it was a great way to learn new words and phrases while following the plot and character developments. So that is how I started watching a show called Aşk Yeniden, or Love Again in English. It was my first Turkish TV show, whereas my mom had already finished watching The Magnificent Century. Love Again is a good comedy and it seemed really fit to be learning Turkish from. I should say that it was very difficult at first, of course, since I'd only finished about half of the A1 textbook, and I didn't expect it to be easy at all, but at least there were Russian subtitles that significantly improved the situation and helped a lot with our discussions with my mother. To be completely honest, I never got around to finishing the show, but it really helped me in learning. So my advice is to watch Turkish shows if you're learning the language. I arrived in Turkey in the spring of 2018 after finishing 8th grade. I went to school in the fall and it was like being thrown in at the deep end. Even though I had finished the textbook and watched the shows, it was still tough. A different language, a different school system. But I did not have any other option, so I had to make do and try my best every day. And I guess this is one of the key factors in learning a language. If I had the option to speak Russian, I would probably be terrible at Turkish even now. This is what usually happened to kids when they came here and went to a Russian school. So don't worry, you are a foreigner after all. The people around you will understand that and never judge you if you make mistakes. Just keep talking and you'll notice that every new conversation gets easier. Let's get back on track and talk about my experience in school. The most difficult thing I have struggled with in the beginning was writing down class notes when the teacher was speaking, mostly because I did not know the words. Either way, I just couldn't do it most of the time and asked my classmates to share their class notes with me, which they always did. Teachers, too, were very understanding of my situation. My teachers have always been, and still are, very kind to me, although I think most of it is because I behave myself very well, always follow instruction, don't skip class, don't sleep in, which is why I think they let me off easy sometimes. Back in 9th grade, my teacher had told me to read books in Turkish and said it would help me tremendously with learning the language. The first book I started reading was The Metamorphoses by Franz Kafka, and I'm still wondering why I started with such a difficult book. I read the first 20 pages or so and decided to check whether I am following the plot correctly by looking up the Russian translation of the book. Turns out I wasn't following it at all. I was under the impression that a person had found a strange insect at their home, but turns out the person themselves turned into an insect. The second book I read was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I finished about 60 pages, but I had no idea what was going on in the book. And I still don't, even to this day. So in conclusion, I would say that reading books in Turkish is probably good, but you should only start reading when you know the language enough. Around the middle of 10th grade, 2.5 years after I moved, I've noticed that I stopped needing to ask people to repeat themselves quite as much, and I understood my classmates and teachers fairly well. So I needed about 2.5 years of living in a Turkish-speaking environment to settle fairly well in terms of language. And I believe I'm quite good at Turkish now, if I can say so myself. I read somewhere that Turkish is among the easiest to learn in the world, and I agree. It is quite easy to pronounce and there are practically no exceptions to the grammar rules. As for the vocabulary, you keep learning that through doing everyday life activities like school, grocery store shopping, going to the cinema, etc. At some point, the seemingly complex verbal constructions become quite easy. Maybe my Turkish knowledge isn't enough to understand some abstract poems or some advanced literature, but it's perfectly fine for school, interacting with friends, and socializing. I've actually gone back to reading Turkish books recently. I always wanted to read Stephen Hawking's book about black holes. You would think that a book like this would be very difficult, but it is going quite well to my own surprise. There can be two explanations for this. Either I've become good at Turkish, or the book was written a bit more coherently. Or maybe both. I'm hoping that my experience with learning Turkish has helped you see that it isn't as tough as it seems. If you're thinking of moving to Turkey, try to use my recommendations and I'm sure you will be just fine. I will be happy to read your questions in the comments below. Tell me the topics you're interested in and I will be more than happy to share my own experiences. I also hope that this was useful for any kids and their parents that are possibly worried about moving because of the language. Always remember that this channel, Life in Turkey, will have the best and necessary information and life hacks about life, school, and education in Turkey.
Subscribe to our channel and get the best professional advice.